Good morning. Welcome to science. So this is actually your very last science video that I'm doing as we are done with the chapter. So your test is going to be a week from tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday. So next week, Wednesday is going to be your test on chapter 2, which is going to be your very last test in science. Let me move you a little bit forward. I don't know how you guys get so far back all the time. Ooh, not that far forward, you'll fall off the table. Do you feel like you're falling? I hope not. Okay, how's that? Is that better? All right. So what we are doing today, this one doesn't want to stay up here, so if it falls down, that's what happens. First, we're going to review our vertebrates and invertebrates. How do we tell warm-blooded versus cold-blooded? What does that mean? And then we're going to go into our lesson for today, which is about behavior and instinct, okay? Are you ready? Because I'm ready. This is so exciting when we start getting done with our books, yeah? So we're done with our penmanship book, but we're still doing penmanship because I need the grade for fourth quarter, right? We're done with our English grammar, yes, very exciting. We're done with our reading book, our reading curriculum textbook. So we're going to just be reading stories for the rest of the year, which is what we normally do. So we're working on Humphrey, and then we're working on, we're going to do a dog-napped cat next, okay? So it's all very exciting stuff. All right, so what we're going, now, after today, we're done with our science book. Can you believe it? So there'll be some activities and things that you'll be doing. And then we'll see what happens after that. There'll be your project that you'll be working on. So I'll be sending out information about that. It's called a field guide. So it's all very exciting stuff still to come. We're just like done with the book, yeah? And next week, Wednesday, we'll be done with the tests, okay? You made it. Can you believe it? Third grade. All right. So we know that the two biggest groups of animals are vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrate means you got a backbone. Invertebrate means you don't have a backbone. Okay. Invertebrates are like worms. A worm is a great example of an invertebrate. Okay. All right. So we have cold-blooded and warm-blooded is our next group. Remember, we have cold-blooded and warm-blooded vertebrates, but we only have cold-blooded invertebrates, okay? Our groups of cold-blooded were fish, amphibians, and reptiles. Remember, cold-blooded means that your blood is the same, that your body, is the same temperature as your surroundings. So fish, if you put a fish in some water that's 87 degrees, the fish will be 87 degrees. If you put them in water that's 20 degrees, the fish will be 20 degrees, okay, Fahrenheit. Amphibians, remember amphibian means double lives. Double lives. It's like 5 o'clock this morning. Double lives. So double lives means that they spend part of their life in the water, and then they spend part of their life out of the water. So we talked, there's only 3 kinds of amphibians: frogs, toads, and salamanders. That's it. Whereas fish, there's like millions of different kinds of fish, and they're teeny tiny bitty fish like a minnow, and ginormous fish like a shark. Okay, so that has a lot of variety, but amphibians, there's only 3. Okay, now there's teeny tiny frogs, and there's big frogs like bullfrog. Those things are huge, but they're just frogs, okay? Or toads, or salamanders. But that's it. That's the only 3, okay? All right, so reptiles is our next group that we talked about, cold-blooded vertebrate. And a reptile is an animal that has rough, dry skin, okay? And they spend their whole life on the land. They bury their eggs in the sand, and they spend their whole life on the land, okay? They go into the water and hang out, but They're considered like land animals. So like alligators don't spend their whole time in the water. They hang out on the grass or the sand or along the shore of the water. Say, turtles, stuff like that. Okay? Then we moved, that was all chapter 1, yes? Then we moved to warm-blooded vertebrates, which is chapter 2. And we said that you can tell it's a warm-blooded vertebrate because a warm-blooded animal will either have hair or fur or feathers. And remember we talked about fur is really just long hair, right? Okay? All right, so we talked about birds being warm-blooded. They have feathers, helps us to identify warm-blooded animals. And we talked about mammals being warm-blooded. They have fur or hair, right? Okay. Some have more than others. Aquatic animals often have less fur than, say, hunting mammals. Okay. So we talked about the different kinds of mammals. We talked about how marine mammals were kind of really mislabeled because marine is only talking about mammals that are in the salt water, right? That live in salt water. And aquatic is animals that live in fresh water. They're really all called aquatic, and then they break them out. And marine is saltwater. We talked about our hooved animals. We talked about how they broke those out into 2 groups as well. Even number and odd number of toes. Okay. We talked about upright animals, how they spend most of their life in a tree. We talked about flying mammals, how flying mammals there's only one, which are bats, which we talked about yesterday, that some are nocturnal and some aren't. And if they're nocturnal, they use echolocation. I was thinking about ecosystem. Echolocation, okay? We talked about gnawing animals, how they have the big teeth that go like this, okay? And how they have to chew on things to keep their teeth from growing all the way down to their feet. All right? We talked about hunting animals, which are carnivores. They're predators like wolves and lions and things. We talked about pouched animals, that's not really a category. That is really marsupials, but they put in the book pouched to kind of give you an easier understanding of what it is. And we talked about how most of those live in Australia, and there is one that lives on the North American continent, which is called a possum. Yes? Because the O is silent. Possum. Okay? And that there's the Virginia possum, which is what lives in the area, but there's also a moose possum that lives elsewhere. All right? So that is our review for today. We're going to look at behaviors. So there's 2 kinds of behaviors. Okay? There's instinct and learned. Okay? Okay? So these are our 2 kinds of behaviors, instinct and learned. So a learned behavior is anything that is taught. So a dog can be taught a trick. They can be taught to fetch or roll over. They can be taught to bark at a command. They can be taught to do all kinds of things as long as it's something dogs can do. They aren't taught to sing or, they can howl. And they aren't taught to put on their clothes, okay? Because those are not things dogs can do. An animal can only be taught a behavior, can only get a learned behavior that they could normally do, okay? So if you've ever gone to Sea Life Park, right, the dolphins do tricks. Those were taught behaviors. Those are learned behaviors. Dolphins can normally do those things, but they're taught how to do them when they're told to. The sea lions and the seal show is also another example of being taught things. Okay? So I'm checking my notes so I don't forget anything, you know. All right. Okay. So not only are some of the learned behaviors like tricks, like you can go see in a show, or you can have fun with your dog, telling him to, fetch or roll over or whatever. But some of the learned behaviors are actually taught to the young by their parents. Yeah. So one of these learned behaviors that would be taught, let me check my notes, I wrote some examples down. Okay, is like learning about finding food. So I told you that I was in Maine before I came here to Hawaii, and they always said if you started filling a bird feeder at the beginning of winter, you had to fill it for the whole time because the birds learned where that food source was. So they would always fly back to that bird feeder. So if for some reason you stopped filling it, they would have no idea where to get food during the winter time, and they would starve to death. So you had to keep filling it because they learned where the food source was. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Another example of a learning, okay, of animals is that monkeys, I don't know if you knew this or not, monkeys know how to crack open things by using other things. So like a rock to crack open a coconut. So what they did was they learned that by watching other monkeys crack open coconuts. Okay? Does that make sense? But their instinct is things that are not learned. I just want to make sure I didn't forget any good examples. So an instinct is something God gave animals so that they can survive. For example, birds know how to make a nest. Nobody showed them, nobody taught them. They just know how to do it because God gave that to them. Okay? Lions know how to chase down animals and eat them because that's what lions do. God gave them that instinct. Okay? Humans are also born with a few instincts. So one of the instincts humans have is the ability to suck. Okay? When you are born as a baby, you had something called a sucking reflex. That's super important because it helps you to be able to eat. Okay? Without it, you would starve. So what happens is when something gets close to the mouth, they start sucking. That way they can get the milk that they need. Okay? It's called a sucking reflex. And that's an instinct. When the baby kittens are born, remember we talked about how they can't see, but God gave them instinct to be able to find milk from their mom. Even though they can't see, they can smell it and find it and stuff. Okay, so those are some examples of instinct. Remember, instincts are given by God that you're born with, that an animal's born with, in order to survive. So sometimes instincts and learning go together, okay? So one of the instincts that all animals have is to find food, okay? So we talked about a lion. They have the instinct to hunt, to chase an animal and hunt it down, right? So that they can eat. So they don't do that well just on their own. The lioness teaches her cubs how best to find a good animal, to chase it down efficiently because it takes energy to chase it down, and to eat it. So even though God gave them the instinct to chase and eat, they also have learned from their mommy how to do that the best way. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. All right, so in Proverbs 30:25, it talks about instinct. So it talks about the fact that ants travel all around working very hard during the summer to find food and store it for the winter. It talks about how the ant is diligent looking for the food. That's what it talks about in the verse. And that we should be diligent too. That's how it relates, okay? But the God gave them the instinct knowing, hey, winter comes. I know Hawaii, you guys don't have winter, but remember we've talked to other places. They do. So the food stops growing. So if the ant didn't store food up for the winter, then, yes, for the winter, during the summertime when there is food, then when winter came and there's no more food available, the ant would starve. So God gave the ant the instinct to be able to go out and locate food, know that they can't eat everything they find, they have to store it away in order to survive the winter. That's just another example that God gave us, okay? Anyone else? All right. So many animals, okay, or mostly all animals, are born with certain instincts that are like across the board, okay? So these instincts are how to find food and that they need shelter of some sort. Because remember, those are our important things: food, water, air, shelter. Those are the things we have to survive, and those are the things animals have to survive as well. Okay, so if animals don't have those four things, then they don't survive. And if people don't have those four things, they don't survive as well. So God gave them instincts to do that. All animals have that instinct. Remember, we're not animals, though. We are made in God's image. We're totally different. Um, so what I'm sorry. So some instincts are for specific animals. For example, when a whale or a dolphin are born, they automatically know how to swim. How many of you guys went to swimming class? I did. I went to swimming class. I went to swimming class for many, 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 many years because I loved to swim. So when I was taught how to swim, I was always in the water. My mom called me her little fish because that's where I spent my whole summer, was in the swimming pool at Legion Park. I had a little pass that I sewed onto my swimming suit, and I was this close to becoming a lifeguard, and the water was just great. But when I jumped in the water the very first time, I did not know how to swim, okay? I had to be taught how to swim. But when a dolphin or a whale are born, they automatically know how to swim, okay? That would not be the case for like a bird, okay? So a bird still needs to find shelter and food, and those instincts are in them, but they do not have the instinct of swimming. They don't know how to swim. They just kind of, okay? They like to dip and stuff, but the swimming thing, not so much, okay? All right. I know. Now I said that, now I'm thinking of a bird who does dive under and swims and to get his food, but we won't talk about that. So it's not true for all birds, but when I was thinking about birds, I was thinking about like robins, and I was thinking about pigeons and finches and those kinds of things. Those birds are not born with an instinct to swim, okay? But there are ducks that would have the instinct to swim, and I can't remember the name of the bird that dives into the water and swims. And they actually even use them in China for fishing. They like tie a rope around their neck so they can't swallow the fish. And they throw them in the water and they go swimming around. They grab the fish, they come up, and the fisherman pulls the fish out of their mouth. And yes, they still use these today. This isn't like their main source of fishing, but I just saw it on TV not that long ago. So I'll see if I can find that name of that bird and put it on this YouTube video for you. Well, on your classroom link, I'm sorry. All right, so some birds do have the thing, just the instinct just went. Okay, so cats, like lions, and even your household cat, if you watch them, they specifically pounce on their food to get it. Yes, remember I told you yesterday about my cat Sam, who didn't do that. But then there's other animals like spiders who inject poison into their prey. Okay, so different ways to do that. Those are all instincts. They are not learned behaviors. They're all instincts. Things that you are born with. Okay? Sometimes God takes over. Okay? And all those instincts and everything go right out the window. So there's a couple of places in the Bible, but the one I'm going to talk about right now is Daniel in the lion's den. So remember Daniel, he was favored by King Darius, and so the other people were jealous. And so they put out a law that you could not pray to your God. That's after they watched Daniel for a while to see what bad things he did, and they couldn't find anything like bad he did. But they did notice that he prayed every day 3 times. How many times do you pray a day? How many times do I pray a day? But anyway, so they found out that Daniel prayed 3 times a day. So they're like, hey, we got him. And so then they made this law, convinced King Darius to sign it, that if you prayed to someone besides King Darius, that you would be thrown into the lion's den. And so Daniel was thrown in, but the lions did not go with their instinct. God shut their mouths, the Bible tells us. An angel came and closed the mouths of the lions, and they didn't eat Daniel. They just hung out with Daniel or whatever. I don't know what they did down there. The Bible doesn't tell us. If you watch like the Veggie Tales, they sang and played and had pizza. But that's just Veggie Tales, right? So we don't really know what happened down there, but we do know that the lions went against their instincts and did not eat Daniel. And it wasn't because they weren't hungry, because what happens next? Daniel survives. King Darius pulls Daniel out and throws in the men who accused him. And immediately before they even hit the floor, the lions were attacking them. Okay? So the lion's instinct was put aside to save Daniel, and it was put aside by God. Whenever God does something that is not within the normal natural order of things, it's considered a miracle. So through a miracle, God saved Daniel. Pretty cool, yes? Another time, was the donkey that talked to Balaam. And it was, donkeys don't talk. Donkeys don't, stop in the middle for no reason and change direction. All right? So that was God using things that were not of the natural order. So the donkey talking is definitely a miracle. Do you have any miracles in your life that you can think about that God did for you that was kind of out of maybe natural things? Remember I told you about my son Daniel and how he was a baby and he was in this crib under this window, and for a long time no gravity pulled that window in because we didn't know it wasn't nailed in. But then one day when we didn't have Daniel in the crib, the gravity took over, pulled that window right down into his crib, and if he would have been there, it would have been a very bad situation. But God held that up until our son wasn't in the crib, and then could allow it to fall into his crib so that we would know that there was a problem there. All right? One time, my son Daniel has a lot of stories. My son Daniel left his Bible on top of his car. And he had just come out of church and he was on his way to work and he had put it on the top when we were talking, and he went to drive away and his Bible was still on top of the car, so we're yelling at him, we're screaming, Daniel, your Bible! And it was a very special Bible because my mom had given it to him when he got baptized, and the Bible stayed on top of the car, on top of the roof. It was crazy. So we went driving after him. Okay, not like a high-speed or anything, because we were looking for the Bible because we figured gravity and centrifugal force, well, not centrifugal force, but forces of physics and all this stuff when you're turning and you're going up hills and down hills. Okay, because he did. He had to go up and down hills. He had to go over this bridge, which was a very windy bridge. And we knew he had to go over this bridge to go to work. And it's really tall and it's always very windy. If we have our windows open, we actually close them when we go over that bridge because it's so windy. Stuff has flown out of the car before. So you can imagine this Bible on top of the roof, of course, is going to go. So what we did is we followed him all the way to his work, looking for his Bible because of all the turns and the stops and the starts and think about when you're in the car and your mom is just stopping and starting and you have like something and things like fly around, right? And that's not going faster over windy bridges or anything. That's just what happens in a car. So we followed him, we went over the bridge, and we looked all over the bridge, and I'm like, oh, it's probably in the water if it got this far. And so we go and we park by him. So we find him in his car, we park by him, and guess what? On top of the roof is his Bible. I could not believe it. So God basically put his hand on that Bible, and none of the natural things that should have happened to that Bible did. It was actually on his roof when we got to his workplace, which was Market Basket. And he worked there. Well, I'm sorry, it was Kmart actually. And he worked there for several years. And literally, it's like, I don't know, 5 miles from where the church was, and over the windy bridge, and it was amazing. It's so cool how God does that for us sometimes, isn't it? So Daniel kept his Bible because of a miracle that God performed. So miracles don't have to be giant things like parting the sea, which God did. He parted the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went through on dry land, the Bible tells us. That's another miracle that goes totally against what the natural things are. So think about your life. Have you or your family experienced anything that was a miracle of God? Okay? And then write that. Write it on the stream, okay? So that we can all see it. That would be so cool. And then we can all praise God with you for all the miracles that you have experienced in your life, okay? All right, because sometimes we think about great big things, but God does things in our lives that are miracles as well. And that is everything for our science lesson today. And so I'm going to be uploading this and putting it on really quickly. All right, so this is our last video of me talking to you about science. So I hope you feel, yay, I've accomplished something this year. I got through my entire science curriculum. Good job. And I will talk to you later. All right, bye guys.